So
Yes, please.
good day all. So I'm going to provide a quick tour of the geospatial hand-in-hand platform today. So I'll start out with the basic functions that are available in the platform. As you might imagine, the platform is driven by a map, which you see when you open the screen. So here we see the globe. And on the left-hand side, we have this gray panel that we call the workbench. So the visualization software we're using here is based on an open source product. So from the workbench, we're able to add data. So from here, I can see the different groups of people, the different domains of data that we've been working with experts from within FAO to curate and assemble. So there are many areas, and I apologize now that we won't be able to go through them all today. Okay, so we'll start with a basic example just to show you how some of the key features work. So the first thing we can do is to add a tabular data set. So in this case, we see that we have colored some of the countries in blue. And we can see that when we click on one of the countries, we find some information. So in this case, the data set is a hotspot and it's unfavorable prospects due to adverse weather conditions. But we're not able to see the whole map. So the next thing we can do is to change the way the map is viewed into a 2D presentation. And indeed, we can change the backgrounds to make so that the blue colors stand out. So now what we're able to see is far more of the map all in one go. The next thing you'll notice about this particular data set that we've loaded is that we have this concept of time on the left-hand side. So this allows me to either step through time, so I can see how these reports have updated over time. This particular data set is a quarterly data set provided by the Trade and Markets Group, or more specifically, the Global Information and Early Warning System. We can also jump to a specific time period, so July 2017, and the map will update to reflect it. So the last way we can manipulate time on the platform is to use the time player along the bottom. So we can pick a particular date just by clicking on it, or we can play a video. So as we press the play, you'll see that the map will update as we switch from one quarter to the next, showing the evolution. So that's one of the key features for managing time. So let's go back to the current period, and let me show you one other thing. So my colleague talked about different engines in the platform. So the first engine we have is for tabular data. So the tabular data engine, here we are able to click and see the details of that. So let me just show you one brief screen from that. So this is the organization of data that is curated and managed by the Trade and Markets Global Information and Early Warning System. And here you're able to download the data and find out more about the data. So as we've already heard today, the key is that we want the data available in standards to be reused and not locked away in desk drawers. I think that's a very, very important objective of this system. So here we see the detailed metadata record. We know that independently the group are able to manage the data themselves, and that's how the data has gone onto the map here. Okay, so let's do a quick drill down into an area of interest. So I'm going to drill down over here into Ecuador for the purposes of this exercise to show you how the storytelling works. So here we see the Ecuador example. We've already clicked to see that right now there's unfavorable prospects due to below average rainfall. So what I'll do is to start to build a story. So the first thing I'll do is to open the story control at the top. I'm going to capture the current scene, and I'm going to say Ecuador, and we have low rainfall, let's say. So I'm basically assembling something akin to a PowerPoint. We have one so far saved on the left-hand side, which is this low rainfall, and now I'm going to continue to build a story. So I'm going to remove this particular data set, and now I'm going to go and investigate in the platform some climate data to give us an idea on why this situation is. So I'm going to look at the historical precipitation. So in this particular case, I'm picking the precipitation Z-score. This is essentially an anomaly. And I'm picking a monthly rather than a 5-daily image because this will give us a better understanding of how the evolution of the rainfall has been in the period. So I'm going to add that to the map. And you'll see that the map colors, and surprisingly, the rainfall doesn't look too bad in the current month of June. So where did that come from? So as we've seen, we can navigate time. So I'm going to go back in time. So I'm going to go back to May, and it looks a bit drier. I'm going to go back to April, and it's getting drier again. And now we start to see the problem. So in March, we see that the situation in the country was there was an anomalous lack of rainfall during that period. So this is already starting us to help to understand the problem. So let me just zoom in a little bit here. And let's capture this scene, and we'll add it to our story. So we're going to say, in March, low rainfall. And so I'm saving that in my story, and now I've got 2 screenshots in my story. Okay, so how do we know if March is important or not? Let's go and have a look at the phenology. So if we go back to the catalogue, we're able to also, under the crops from the agricultural stress index, we're able to look at the phenology, or basically the cycle of growth of the plants. And this is a product that's put out by the agricultural stress index group. And so here we can see in the start of the growing season, you'll see that the map is predominantly this green color over here, which is in the March and April. So you see that the crops would have been just kicking off during that period where we didn't see any rainfall. So I'm going to add this to my story as well. So I'll very quickly capture this, and we can say March start of growing season, and I'm going to add this to my story. Okay, so what happens as the crops develop? Let's look at the middle of the growing season, and we can also see that the same time period is also very important to the growth of the crops. So I'm also going to capture this one, add it to my story very quickly. The middle of the growing season. Oops, too many typos. And I'm going to save that. So now I'm slowly building up this story. So I'm going to remove that one also from the map. And now I'm going to have a look at some of the future precipitation. So what does the future hold? So I'm going to move away from historical. I'm moving to the future. I'm going to look at this and the anomaly predictions, in this case from the CHEPS group, sorry, and I'm going to add that to the map. So we can see, in fact, already that July was predicted to be dry. And as I move forward into August and into September, we see the situation actually is much drier than we would normally expect in the month of August and September for this area of the world. So I think this is also interesting for my story. I'm going to quickly capture this one. So coming months look dry too. Clearly here I could add some more detailed information and add some styling, but for brevity I'm not going to do that today. Okay, so now I have a collection of stories. I can reorganize the stories so they appear in a different order. I can go and take one of the stories, and in fact this one here I made a mistake, so let me just edit that and change that to in and save it. And so now I've quickly prepared a story. So what can I do with this story? I can share this story with a colleague or someone I'm working with. So I copy this address that is generated, this unique address from my story. And now what I'll do is I will pretend to be somebody else who's just received an email. And so now I click on the link in the email, and the platform will launch. And we will hopefully see the story that I just created. So somebody has created a story. Would you like to see it? Yes, I would like to see it. So you'll see that now the screens are following exactly the story that I just built up about the low rainfall in Ecuador and the analysis that I prepared. So this is a very quick and effective way of sharing the information that we build up in a sort of PowerPoint kind of way. The important thing to note is that the data is still active, it's still live. I can now, in receiving this address, continue to work with it, elaborate it, reshare it, or with other people. So this is the storytelling feature. Okay, so I will now go back to the original one. So I'm back as myself again. I'm no longer the person receiving the email. And I'm going to, you see that I've added an awful lot of data to the screen. So I'm going to remove it all. And I'm going to zoom back out. And you'll see, actually, I've removed a little too much. I want to keep the country boundaries. So let's go over to boundaries and put the boundaries back on. But in fact, while I'm there, we could look at some of the other boundaries we have. So we have also included fish catch areas. I know in Italy, when you go to a supermarket and buy fish, you'll see that they always provide the FAO fish catch area. And this allows us to quickly look up those districts. And it also allows us to color a map with statistics based on where fish are caught. So it's a very important data set for that. The other thing that we can do with boundaries is that we're able to look at far more detailed boundaries. So, for example, we can look at the subnational breakdown, or we can look at the breakdown level below that. Mm-hmm. So, with these two areas, we're definitely able to get a good understanding of how the countries are broken down, and therefore be able to show statistics. Mm-hmm. So let me show you a concrete example of that. If we were to look under food security, I happen to know that Nigeria, the World Bank have a very nice analysis that they have prepared on the poverty rates at subnational level. So we're able to zoom in here and see some fairly detailed data on the poverty rates in Nigeria. Okay, so to continue with the tour, let's go back to the various data sources. And for the next case I'd like to show you, I would like to talk about cassava. So I'll start out with taking some time series statistics. And I'm going to be looking at cassava. So this data is coming live from the FireStat database. So let me just zoom out a little bit from that so we see a better idea. And the area I'd like to focus on for this presentation is Malawi. So what we can see here is some of its neighbors. So we see Tanzania has got this yield for cassava, and we can compare it with Zambia, and we can compare it with Mozambique, and finally with the area we're going to look at in a little bit more detail and shortly, which is Malawi. And you can see that Malawi has a wonderful yield for cassava. Okay, so let me tidy up this a little bit, and let's see if we can do some more geospatial analysis on that, drilling down to the subnational data. So I'm going to make that invisible for the minute, and I'm going to come back to the catalog. And now we're going to look at some of the subnational data sets. I'm going to start with the global agroecological zone data. This particular one allows us to see the potential and suitability for crops. I'm going to change it from banana to cassava, and I'm going to change it to mean. And you'll see that the map now updates. Let me zoom in a little bit. The map now updates with a pixel level data. So rather than having a figure for the whole of Malawi, in fact, we saw that the yield for Malawi most recently is, so that I think we divide, is about 22 tons per hectare. And if we look at the data coming from the global agroecological zones, we see it's 37.5 tons in this very high potential area here. So what we can do is to also compare it with another data set from a different provider. So this is showing data from outside of FAO. So this is MapSpam, which is also a well-respected data set for looking at the potential of crops. So we're going to zoom into here. I'm going to do the same trick, and we'll keep it all technologies, and we're going to look at cassava again, and we see a mess on the screen. So essentially I'm not able to see which one is which. So the other tool I'm going to use is this splitting tool over here on the right hand side, and I'm going to say I would like to see the map spam on the right, and I would like to see the global agroecological zones on the left. So now we can see that a much better comparison between, let me just make this a little bit darker so we see it. Okay, so now we can see a much better comparison between the two products. And so if we look at what MatSpam is giving us, so we're in the same ballpark. So this is in kilos, so we divide by 1,000 to get tons. So we've got 36 tons per hectare. So what this has shown us is that we're able to compare multiple data sources for the same concept and do a fairly detailed analysis with a spatially disaggregated data set. Okay, so let's go back and clean up here. And we're going to go back to crops. And I'll show you one, no, actually, let me just move straight on in the interest of time to livestock. So I'll show you another data set working on livestock. This is from the livestock unit. And I'm going to put cattle on. And I want to focus for this particular one on Lake Victoria. So in fact, let's just see where Lake Victoria is. So Aquastat will give us the inland water bodies. So I'm adding, do I know where Lake Victoria is? It's not there. Okay, so I'm going to focus up in this area up here around Lake Victoria. So here we see Lake Victoria. Okay, and what we're seeing on the screen is the density of cattle. I'd like to overlay some data on this from the Animal Health Group, and in particular, this has been a contribution from the EMPRESS-I Group, which is FAO's Animal Health and Disease Information System, with a lot of input also from the Rift Valley Fever Digital Support Tool. So I'm uploading a data set right now that's being live fed from the Animal Health database. I happen to know, in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump to an area where I know that there was an outbreak. So I know that if we jump to, I think it was in early August, in fact, there we have one, we can see that we have an outbreak with the outbreak information. And again, we can step through time and we can see how some of these points are evolving to see how the disease is spreading. So again, we can click on the points. We can see some information about the fact it was confirmed. We can see the source of the information. And in this case, I can also jump out and see a detailed record provided by the EMPRESS system. So let me just close that, go back into full screen. What we know about Rift Valley fever is that it's transmitted by mosquitoes. And the mosquitoes don't just bite the cattle, they also like us humans. So I think we could also put some humans onto this map. So let's move up to socioeconomic and demographic. I'm going to go to a human. I'm going to use the gridded density. So this is coming from WorldPop. I'm going to add that to the map. And again, I'm going to split my screen in two, and we'll put the humans on the left. And now I'm going to put the animals on the right. And what I hope we'll see is that there's a correlation from where the people are and the outbreaks are. So again, this is showing a cooperation from many different units, from the livestock unit, from the socioeconomic on their demographics, and from the animal health and the Rift Valley fever group in particular. So there's lots going on this map, and it shows you the importance of being able to assemble this data from many different areas around FAO. So I'm going to clean up again, and I move on to the next example I'd like to show you today. Sorry, let me just remove that splitter, and I'm going to take a look at some of the data that's been provided on land. I'm just going to show you, so for the soil database and the Global Soil Partnership, they have many different soil attributes. Today we're just going to focus on the one, which is global soil organic carbon. I'm going to add that to the map, and again we see the detail of the map. I'd like to also show you here the ability for us to show 3D maps. So if we Kilimanjaro, so I'm just going to zoom into Kilimanjaro for the minute. Okay, so here we are seeing Kilimanjaro. Let me just zoom out, it's a little bit too too zoomed in, and we can't see it so clearly. So what we're able to do is to change that presentation so that that we use a 3D terrain. So I'm going to use the 3D terrain here. So now we can see that this new control has become available at the top right. With this control, I'm able to tilt how we're able to see it. Zoom in a little bit and zoom out a little. It's a little too much. And now I can lay on top also the hill shades so that we can start to see some of this detail here. So now we're able to see. Let me just see if I can do that a little bit more, so it's a little bit more obvious. So if we just tilt it a little bit more, we can see that now we have this sort of 3D effect going on the data. So we're taking a 2D layer, we've draped it over a 3D model, and it's allowing us to see this sort of 3D effect. And clearly this works everywhere, not just in Kilimanjaro. So yeah, this is a way of taking the simple data, overlaying in a complicated model. Okay, so that was the soil data. I'm going to go back to a 2D story. So I'm going to go back to a 2D picture. I'm going to remove the story, and we'll take one last one from land, only because I'd like to show you one of the partners. So in this case, this Bangladesh data set. Here we the reason I want to share this one is because it's prepared in the country, by the countries, together with the National Forest Information Management Project there. So just zoom in on that one here, and we can see this data set. So the importance of this is, as they're following standards, we're able to very quickly integrate their data. They're making the data public, they're following standards, and I think that really shows the benefits of following standards. So I'm going to remove that, and now I'm going to zoom back out and move along with a quick whirlwind tour of some of the data that we have. So the next data set is so within the Aquastat group. The Aquastat have many different geospatial layers, from statistics on water withdrawals to hydrological basins. So, for example, we could take a look at, well, we haven't been over to the Near East yet, so let's zoom to that extent. So we can see that here we have some of the hydrological basins, and these again can be used for further analysis. But what I really wanted to show today is some of the near real-time data. So from the water productivity data, I'm going to go down to subnational, I'm going down to the Lebanon, and I'm going to pick some 10 daily data. So let's look at the decadal. So decadal means every 10 days in this particular case. So I'm going to load that data set here, and I'm now going to zoom into that data set. And okay, this you can see that we're now very detailed. So my background image is blurred. I'm going to change it to a very detailed satellite imagery rather than using the one that I was before. And I'm going to split the screen in two. And I'm going to show the actual evapotranspiration on the left-hand side. And I just wanted to show you how well this data is lining up, and how important this data is. So we'll see that the fields very closely match this very high-resolution satellite imagery, no matter how much we zoom in here. And that we're also able to see the still real live actual data. Well, actually, this is not so recent. Let me just make it more recent for you. So you'll see that this is every 10 days, and I can go right up to the current period now. And so now when I look, we're looking at the first 10 days of July. So you can see the data is near real time, it's up to date, it's at a fantastically detailed level. Okay, I'll take one last data set before we move on from the water productivity, which is on the land cover classification. So here we'll add that, and I'll put that on the right-hand side just to show you an example of how we're able to also see what's going on in these areas. So here they have things like the potatoes being grown, or well, I guess you can see from the legend the classification systems that they're using here. Okay, so I'm going to remove all that, and in the interest of time, move on quickly. So let's remove that splitting record here, and zoom back out. And let's go back to a simple map. So the other thing you'll notice that everything I've done here, I have not required an application installed on my computer. This is all done directly in a web browser. So it's not as if I've had to install special software or do anything special, just from a web browser. So another example of agencies sharing data following a standard. So this is some aquifer data. And again, the map is drawn by them, it's shared by them, they're following an open standard. And so we're able to very quickly add this other data source that perhaps we don't have in FAO, or perhaps we do, but we would like to contrast it with someone else's, be able to contrast data from a different source. So I think this is, again, the power of using standards, both to document the data and to share the data. Okay, so I'm going a little bit quickly here. I'll show you one last example from one of our partners, ICHBAR. So ICHBAR produced some climate anomaly data. Oops, ICHBAR are providing some drought indexes. So here they are showing a calculated and composite drought index. They do this only for the MENA region, but again, the fact that they share the data means that if we're interested in this region, we're able to also see their data presented on a map. Again, with the click, look up the current month and the drought probabilities. Okay, oops. So I don't think we wanted to zoom in on the legend there. And okay, so I'll remove that and I'll move on to the final thing that I would like to show you today, hoping that I'm not running out of time. So I'd like to show you how we build up a particular model doing some analysis. So I'm going to first of all jump right to the very end of the story. So the very end of the story is that we are trying to calculate the most suitable areas for mobile storage locations. So this is some data that was prepared by the hand-in-hand geospatial unit. And so basically they're using data to perform a detailed analysis. So rather than comparing these different layers as I'm doing interactively now, they're publishing the result as a final product. So here is one of the outputs, which is the ports of Ghana. So let's try and see how they got there. So we can look at some of the socioeconomic data and the infrastructure data. So now I'm going to have a look at where the seaports are. So you see firstly that these are where the seaports are. So you can see it's starting to make a bit of sense what they were doing here. The next thing they would have been interested in is in the roads. So we can put some very detailed road data on. So I'm going to start with the OpenStreetMap. And again, we can zoom right in down here. And we can see where these roads are in Ghana in this case. And as you see, as we keep on zooming in, we see more and more detail. But this detail isn't always useful. It's useful if you're trying to find your route around somewhere, but when you're trying to do a multi-criteria analysis on locating places, then the data that might be more interested is a sort of aggregate higher level of just where are the roads in terms of density. So instead of looking at the detail, we can upload the density data. So we can put on, for example, some primary roads. And what you'll find is that this analysis was underdone taking many of the different road density levels that allows us to see how slowly they assemble this model. So I'm going to remove the roads and I move on through some of the other data sets we have here. I'll skip the railways, but we can also stick in, we can also put in airports. So I guess this is the major airport here in Ghana, but we might be interested in some of the secondary airports. So I'm going to add in the medium airports, which is the slightly bigger data set. We can see, in fact, there are a few other airports that could be interesting for shipping of high value products. So let's remove the airports and come back. So now the next thing I'd like to do is to perhaps look at the electricity. So we don't directly have electricity. We do have electricity coming from the ITU, but they're aggregate data. So they tell us about the percentages of access that people have. What I'd like to do is to show you the sort of surrogate for electricity. So this is stable lights. It's a composite image that's created by looking at how much light is given out over the year. I'm looking at the stable values, and it gives us sort of a surrogate from where the electricity might be. So I'm going to split this one in two, and I'm going to say that I want on the left-hand side to see 1992, and on the right-hand side I want to go down to one of the more recent ones, say 2013. And so now what we're able to do is to see how in this time frame the access to electricity, well, at least based on this surrogate of the nighttime light, has grown within Ghana. So again, this helps us to provide context to our analysis and helps us to have a better understanding of the data that we're looking at. So let me move a little bit faster. The other thing that's interesting is to know the connectivity of the internet. So telecommunications is very important. So here I'm going to add where the mobile coverage is. So here in Ghana, we can see the areas where they have good mobile coverage. And in fact, if we add some of the other data that we have, so for example, where the fiber optic cables in Ghana are, and where the submarine cables, together with where those ports land, we will, sorry, one second, where is that? The landing points, we can see that, so this is where the cables are landing. And again, it backs up our theory. This is a good location where we should be providing some more analysis. So I'm doing all this analysis using the interface. But the GIS lab clearly used a lot more data than I'm using here. But for the purposes of this presentation, I think it gives you a good idea of the data that we have. So on a final note, I'll just end on one last data set, which is the project investments. And so often when we're looking at this, well, we've still got the seaports, so we don't want those. It's often interesting to know where the projects are and how much money has been spent. So this is the FAO publishes the project data using a standard open format. It's a YATI format. So we're able, for example, to take a look down here. Let's have a look. Maybe in Indonesia, we can see some pretty enormous figures of some of the budget. And we can also then say, okay, we'll give some detail on that. And so now it's busy fetching the list of projects that are available in Indonesia. We have a little bit of patience when it's just fetching this data set. This was quite a big one. And so now if I click here, we'll see a long list of projects, and we can get a very quick summary of what's going on in these areas. Okay, I'm not sure if I have any more time. I will proceed just 2 seconds longer, just to show you. No, I think I'm out of time. Okay, thank you very much.